gee, it's almost like if your composer and your director have some sort of relationship and are able to talk to each other about what's going on in the film over the course of its development. It's almost like that's going to have some kind of positive effect on your score. Like if you have a director and a composer who met in film school and have already worked on 2 other films with the same lead actor, and then the 3 of them get together and make another film, it's almost like knowing the team that you surround yourself with is going to give you a heads up in the industry. It's almost like having a director and a composer forming some kind of relationship has a positive effect on the filmmaking process. It's almost like being able to know ahead of time that you're going to be scoring a superhero film set in Africa and getting enough time to actually go to Africa and research African music and being able to go and meet African musicians and have the opportunity to record them and also pay a visit to the International Library of African Music. It's almost like being able to do all of that is going to give you the ability to write a really fantastic score to your film. It's almost like expecting your composers to write a film score from start to finish in a month really isn't enough time, and having the ability to put in a lot of time and resources and hard work is going to mean that by the time the director hands you his 4-hour cut of the film, you already have enough material to score the whole thing. But because you've already done so much work and research into everything that you're doing, your main characters already have really well established modular themes. I don't want to sell Göransson short here because he did an absolutely phenomenal job, but I strongly feel like a part of the success of the Black Panther soundtrack is because Göransson is BFFs with Coogler, and he had the extra time and resources and knew what was going on with the film ahead of time and had more of an opportunity to polish this score. And it shows, man, this score just, there's so much to talk about. But I'm kind of at an impasse here. See, normally in these kinds of videos, I break down all the themes and leitmotifs, and then I explain how they're used. But Göransson already did that first part. He broke down the theme for Wakanda, and by extension T'Challa's theme, in a video he did for the Genius YouTube channel. And he broke down Killmonger's theme, along with another piece of music that he uses to bind T'Challa and Killmonger together, in an interview he did for Song Exploder. So, as much as I'd like to try and explain it from my own perspective, you aren't really going to get a better explanation than from the composer himself. So, with that in mind, I'm going to do my best to break down how and why Göransson does what he does in this film, but because I'm never going to be able to say anything that's more accurate than the composer himself, I'm just going to use his explanations. Okay, so T'Challa really has 3 aspects to his theme: the talking drum, an 808 pattern, and this big brass. The talking drum is a type of drum where you can tighten the drum head by squeezing on the body. In other words, you can pitch the drum while you're playing it. And the idea is that while you play it, you try and mimic the sound of speech, thus the name, talking drum. So in the case of Black Panther, Göransson had his performers say T'Challa.
And then the last final element for the talking drum is T'Challa's name. T'Challa.
All right, now this 808 pattern. Okay, so it's important to know that 808 is shorthand for the Roland TR-808. It was a drum machine that came around in 1980 and was only around for 3 years, but it revolutionized the world. If you've ever listened to a radio, then I can guarantee you've heard 808s.
The soul sonic force, the big power, and MC Glow, we emphasize this, so we got ego.
But no area of music was hit by the 808 quite as hard as hip-hop. Being able to program your own drum beats without actually having to have a drummer was invaluable to the world of hip-hop. The 808 is to hip-hop what the violin was to Paganini and the piano to Liszt. It's just peanut butter and jelly. And that brass is supposed to evoke a sense of royalty, probably because T'Challa's a king. So you might not hear all these components at the same time necessarily, like you might just hear the talking drum or you might just hear that royal brass, but these are all aspects of what make up T'Challa's musical character. And what's cool is that Göransson constructed Killmonger's theme in the exact same modular way. There's this piano/string line that Göransson says was inspired by Bach's St. Matthew Passion.
I listened a lot to Bach lately. Some of that inspiration of that layer came from Bach, especially the Matthew Passion.
Göransson said that this was supposed to reflect Killmonger's intellect. Also, Killmonger gets his own set of 808s. And then there's a part with a fula flute. Also known as a tambin, sarindu, or fulanu. It's a flute used by the Fulani in West Africa. And finally, there's Killmonger's primary leitmotif. Okay, so clearly a lot of thought went into how these characters' themes were constructed, but what's more cool is that you can see a clear relationship between these characters just in the instrumentation used in their themes. Both have some sort of traditional African sound. T'Challa has the talking drums literally saying his name, and Killmonger has that Fulani flute. They both use 808s in their theme, which might come from Göransson's extensive hip-hop background, or maybe there's some kind of like meta statement being made here, like part of this film takes place in Oakland where the Black Panther movement originated, and even when the film goes to Korea, you still hear that hip-hop influence. Maybe the 808s were intentional, maybe it's just Göransson's musical fingerprint, I don't really know. But the one part of T'Challa and Killmonger's themes that I don't quite get is that they both have a distinctly European component. T'Challa has this royal brass.
After I created this beat, me and Ryan wanted to see how it would sound like if we added some horns on this to make it more royal.
And if you saw my video on superhero themes, then you'll know that that kind of brass sound really goes back to European monarchy. Having said that, there's a chance that that brass makes T'Challa sound more like a superhero. But to confuse the situation even more, in the film you hear this. And I'll just let Göransson explain this one.
In this opening scene, you can hear him sing about an elephant that had just died. Elephant being the synonym for the king.
So in the film, we kind of have these two musical representations of a king, this royal brass from T'Challa, but also this vocal line with that elephant symbolism of an African king. And when it comes to Killmonger, well, he has that Bach-inspired line, and to be honest, there's nothing more European sounding than Bach. But these aren't the only ways Göransson links T'Challa and Killmonger. There's an actual theme that he mentions in that interview with Song Exploder that comes to represent T'Challa's father, and the notion of like royalty or becoming king. Like we literally hear it whenever T'Challa's talking about or to his father. So Göransson uses these themes as a means of reflecting what's going on in the story. Like when we're first introduced to Killmonger, we get that Bach-inspired line.
See right away in the West African exhibit, please, right away.
Then some 808s.
Because it's better to leave the crime scene more spread out. Makes us look like amateurs.
Then we get the rest of his theme with that Fulani flute and his main motif. But that's exactly how Göransson scores the scene where Killmonger reveals himself to the court. You get that little Bach-inspired line.
2 billion people all over the world that looks like us, but their lives are a lot harder.
Then some 808s.
You're Eric Stevens, an American black operative, a mercenary.
Then the rest of his theme.
Ungubani, Indingu Indidaka, Unyanaka Njobu. Huh?
So even though you don't consciously realize it, because these two scenes are scored in the exact same way, it musically reflects how taking the throne room was just as meticulously planned as stealing an artifact from a museum. But where Göransson really starts to flex is when he starts switching what instruments are playing what leitmotifs as a means of demonstrating the shifting circumstances of the story. Check out what happens in this scene where T'Challa beats M'Baku. At first we hear T'Challa's brassy figure when he starts winning. Immediately followed by that fatherly motif because he's fighting for the throne. And T'Challa's brass continues with the crowd joining in. You can even hear that father theme in brass again when T'Challa is crowned King of Wakanda.
I now present to you King T'Challa, the Black Panther.
It's his father's theme, the king's theme, being played in T'Challa's royal brass, as opposed to hearing this theme in strings, which you hear in other situations. Now compare that to what you hear when Killmonger shows Claw that he's actually from Wakanda. You hear that father motif, but in the Fulani flute, demonstrating Killmonger's different perspective on his family line. And if you really want to see how this musical system unfolds, then check out the scene where Killmonger challenges T'Challa to fight for the throne. You can hear some of his flute when he's getting undressed.
Just to get here, I killed an American.
You get some of T'Challa's theme when he starts doing well, but then Killmonger's flute starts getting mixed in with the combat as soon as Killmonger starts making a stand. The instrumentation is literally moving with the flow of what's happening on screen. When Zuri dies, we get this altered dramatic version of T'Challa's theme because Zuri is an extension of what T'Challa is fighting to defend.
James. No! No! No!
As T'Challa loses, we get more of that dramatic rendition of his motif.
Who's supposed to lead you into the future?
Is there nothing that can be done?
And it all ends with Killmonger being crowned king, with Killmonger's Bach line and his motif in low brass as a means of demonstrating his menacing royalty. But you can see something similar for T'Challa when he comes back from the dead and faces off against Killmonger. The scene opens with Killmonger's theme, but as soon as T'Challa shows up, we get his father's theme in voices, which then quickly transitions into T'Challa's theme, where the voices double the brass. As far as I could tell, this was the only time where there were voices with T'Challa's theme. And when you bring up the fact that Göransson included a song about an elephant representing an African king, you kind of get the feeling that this is where Göransson really believes that T'Challa has earned the mantle of King of Wakanda. It's also the coolest part of the movie, aside from the scene where Okoye throws a spear through a car. Speaking of which, the Dora actually get their own leitmotif. It's this vocal line. Which Coogler himself brought up in a scene breakdown he did for Vanity Fair.
And this is where you hear the Dora cue. It's a group of women in Senegal doing a yip, like a choo, 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 choo.
And speaking of little details, in the opening when we hear the kid talking to his dad, we hear a kora, which is a plucked string instrument, kind of like a guitar with a really big bridge.
A meteorite made of vibranium. The strongest substance in the universe.
At first I thought this was Killmonger and his father, but the only other time I was able to hear a kora was when T'Challa was thinking of his father right before he goes to the ancestral plane. That might just be me, and that's just the only place I heard it. Speaking of listening way too hard to small details, I'd like you to all put on your aluminum foil hats, because this is where Sideways wants to convince you that his hallucinations are real. When T'Challa wins the fight against M'Baku, we hear a slightly altered version of that father motif. This is the regular father motif. And this is the one that plays at the end of the challenge. It has a slightly different ending.
King T'Challa, the Black Panther.
To me, it kind of sounds like a happy ending or a victory fanfare, but that might just be me. But I was only able to hear this slightly different version of the father motif in two other places. First, during Killmonger's visit to the ancestral plane.
But I fear you still may not be welcome.
Why?
And then again when Killmonger dies. And it almost feels like the different cadence on this motif is supposed to convey a sense of finality, like T'Challa is the king. This is where he's supposed to be. Here's our closure. This scene serves as closure for Killmonger's father, finally being able to be honest with his son, so there's his closure. And then finally when Killmonger dies, and technically wins, because he manages to change T'Challa's mind and reveal Wakanda to the world, that's kind of like mission accomplished. That's Killmonger's closure. And I know I'm already pushing it with YouTube with all the clips that I'm using, but this film almost constantly has leitmotifs playing. It's fantastic. I don't think there's a single moment where there's music playing in this film that doesn't convey some aspect of how the story's unfolding or what kind of message the director and composer were trying to send. I really can't get enough of it, and I'd strongly encourage you to check out Göransson's breakdown for yourself instead of just listening to a neckbeard geek out about a film score. I'll leave the links in the description below. Thanks for watching. I'd like to thank my patrons for making these videos possible, with a very special thank you to Anna Birch, AFN Matt, Megan Hernscher, Ethan Rooney, Hayden Elza, and Donovan Hodges. If you like what you saw here, be sure to check out my other videos. Follow me on Twitter and Twitch to have your musical questions answered live, and if you really like what I'm doing, consider supporting the channel on Patreon. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching.